Hey everybody, Richie here with another episode in the Lens Wizard Lightroom series, and today we're going to talk about color grading. Okay, so in this episode I'm going to show one example of how you can color grade over in Photoshop, and even though this is the Lightroom series, we're going to show one example of how we can color grade over in Photoshop, and one example of how we can use, obviously, Lightroom, because I use both. Now, with that said, color correcting is an artistic thing. It's very subjective, both in the technique that's used and just in the end result. Very subjective. Some people might like it one way, other people might like it another way. So it is an artistic form to it. Now, with that said, let's go into a little bit of the history of color grading. History of color grading dates all the way back to film. And I mean all the way back in the early days of film, when it was actually used for color correction. And that's why I have this image here of Callie holding a color corrector. It was used for color correction back then. We don't have to use it for color correction now because we have things like an X-Rite color checker that works great. And now in cinematography, it was used, again, cinematography was film, and it was used to color grade or color correct the movies so that they could be played on a television tube screen which emitted blue light, and there was a whole science, and more of a science than an artistic thing there. But either way, just that's a little bit of the history of color grading as it was known back then, color correcting. Now, there's 1,000 different ways to do it. It's just, I'm going to give you just two examples here. So let's get out of looking at Callie and let's go over here, and we're in Lightroom and we're going to look at Chloe. So over here we see Chloe. This is a raw image straight out of camera. And let me see if I can get my side panels opened up. By the way, I hit Shift Tab, opens and closes both of your side panels at the same time. Also, F will put you at full screen. So here is a raw image straight out of camera, nothing done to it other than lens corrections. And this is Chloe. She's sitting in a cell in Eastern States Penitentiary in Philadelphia. The only thing in the cell is what you see right there, other than that bed frame in the background. But there was a chair, there was a desk, and there was a newspaper and a paperweight. She sat down in the chair, and I said, do something interesting, and she put the paperweight up to her eye, and with her Never Alone tattoo with the little heart, sitting in a prison cell, I just thought it was kind of interesting. Made a very interesting photo. So with that said, this is unedited, and I'm going to take you over into Photoshop and just real quick run you through the steps. I already have it edited. I'm just going to show you the layers and stuff that I did to make it be what it needed to be so I could color grade it. So now with that said, here we are over in Photoshop, same image, not edited. So the very first thing we have here is the skin. That's normally what I would do, and I just worked on the skin a little bit. She's got beautiful skin, but like everybody, we all have some dark spots and some light spots. So I took out just that dark spot under her eye and a few distracting freckles. And then we moved on to an eye kicker, and I call it an eye kicker. And essentially, it's very hard to see, but it's at 26% opacity. And I have a tutorial somewhere, I think, up on how to do an eye kicker. It's very simple. So I put it up to 100% there so you can see it, but very subtle, just to lighten the eye a little bit. Then the next thing we did was a hue and saturation layer, where we masked out just the eye, and it was for color. And if again, I have the opacity turned down on this. If I bring the opacity up, it's kind of hard to see. It's very subtle, but it's there. And actually, you can see what I did there. I checked colorize and put a little bit of color in her eye. So then moving on from that, I had this brightness layer, and I had it actually cranked up pretty high. But just so you know, sometimes I'll put brightness on, not so much for the end result, but just while I'm working so that I can see some detail. The image, I will admit, was a little dark without this, but sometimes I'll wait to do the brightening at the very end. So with that said, I went on up into, made it a smart object, and We had this. Now, I'm not going to go through this because I took it over into Color Effects Pro. No real big secrets over there, but Color Effects Pro is a Nick Google plugin, which is free download actually, and I'll put a link to that in the show description down there. But anyway, Color Effects Pro, what did I do? Very simple, total contrast. Then I did some skin softening. I like the dynamic skin softener over there. And then I did Pro Contrast and Skylighter. And just so you know, when you do Skylighter, only 3% is all you need. Just gives that nice little yellow to the skin, everything like that. So now, that ends the edit right there. There is the edit, and there is a nice photo. When you look at this photo, it's very nice. But let's color grade this photo. Let's color grade. And the reason I chose this photo, just so you know, I have gotten so many compliments by people who are not photographers, know very little about photography, look at it and say, how did you get that photo to look like that? And because I have this in my printed portfolio, and when people go through that book, they see this, and it's always one that stops them. And actually, I have two images of Chloe that are color graded very close to the same tone. So now, with that said, one of the main things that you can use, and it's kind of pretty popular right now, and that's the reason why I'm putting this tutorial up, and that is these lookup tables. So what I'm going to do is I already have some chosen here, but before I get to the ones that I chose, I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to show you. So you click on this thing that looks like a graph, right? And it opens this up, and you go up here to the top, and one of the first ones that I always like to work with, for whatever reason, it just turns me on, is tension green. Now, obviously, too much, right? So tension green, what I will do most times is, where do I start? My starting number is 25. I'll bring it to 25 and hit enter. And then usually what I do is I stack these. Okay, so let's back out a little bit and let's just see what tension green at 25. Okay, and then go up here. Now I have a whole bunch of these in here, and I am going to go down. Some of these I actually purchased, I will admit. Okay, so let's go to Horror Blue. Okay, so Horror Blue, and again, whoop, up on the opacity, I'll put it at 25 and see what that gives me. And that's with the green. That's without the green. And this is the process. This is how you color grade. You just sit and you kind of go through what looks good, what doesn't look good. And you know what? I think there's another one that I like better. I'm going to bring this back up to 100. And I'm going to go in here. And the one I want, I think, is Moonlight. And if it's not Moonlight, I think it's Moonlight. Sometimes I don't even look at the names of them, so I just click on them and see what they give me. So yeah, Moonlight is the one that I was working with. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to match for you. The end edit I did for this was over in Lightroom. Did an awesome edit. And I'm trying to match it in Photoshop. And I'm just doing this on the fly. So anyway, you can kind of see this is where you would find your lookup tables. LUTs, as they're called, L-U-T, lookup table. So let me turn these off because I had a group down here where it says color grade. And if I open up this group, you can see I have 3. So let's look. I have tension green at 25%. I have Anchor Destiny is one of the purchased ones at 44%. And I have Moonlight, which is a free one that's already in Photoshop, and that is at 31%. And if I turn all of those on, it gives me that. And I did go and mask out off of her skin at about 50% opacity, so that's like middle gray, and it was a little too yellow looking. So that is when I came up with this color adjustment layer, and I'm sorry, this hue and saturation layer. Get my terminology right here. And I did the yellows, and you can kind of see I dropped the yellows down. So when I turn this on and I masked it's just on her skin. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong layer here. Okay, so you in saturation layer, and you can see that there's what I did. It was yellows, and if I turn this off, you can see on her skin, I just thought it was a little too orange. And that is very close to what I did over in Lightroom. So without further ado, second part of this video, let's go over into Lightroom and look at what I did there with that edit. Okay, so here we are back in Lightroom, and now this is the image that we seen over in Photoshop, but less the color grading. Now let's look at my final image. Now this image, I mind you, was shot back in 2014. So I've had this image around a while, and this is the edit that I did back in 2014. And this is the edit that everybody seems to love. Now, a few people will look at it and say maybe it's a little washed out, but for the most part, the color grading on this, I've gotten lots of compliments on, and this was all done just in Lightroom. Now let's look at exactly what was done. Well, first off, what was done was I put a preset that I had made on to it, and just boom, it was done. But let's look at what the preset did to it. So it didn't really do much to, anything up here. This exposure I just did now as I'm making this video. But the preset moved the vibrance up and brought the saturation down. The preset also worked on the tone curve. And as you can see, it brought the darks up 52. So if I bring, you can see where it would be. Okay, so this is what the preset did. It brought the darks up using the tone curve. Now also we go into our hue and saturation. We look at hue, it didn't do anything to hue. We look at saturation, and it brought everything down. In different, you can see the yellow, it only brought 13, other stuff 12, some stuff 14. Now we go over here into luminance, didn't do anything over there. So it just brought the saturation down. Now let's look at split toning. In split toning, we had put a color into the highlights, and we put a color into the shadows. This is what color grading is. And this kind of maybe explains it a little more than the way you've seen it over in Photoshop, because in Photoshop I was just clicking on those LUTs. Now those LUTs were presets, but you can also kind of make your own LUTs. It's very easy to do. But this tutorial is not about that. But over here in Lightroom, I just want to show you have all of this power available to you in Lightroom that you can do what I think is very nice color grading. So over here in detail, nothing about this panel at all. Lens corrections, I mean, you could turn lens corrections on there. They should have been on, because this was shot on a 24-105. Transform, we don't have anything over in there, but now in effects, nothing in effects. But down in camera calibration, someplace that people never really venture too often. Down in camera calibration, you can see what I've moved and adjusted down here. I've adjusted a lot of this stuff to get it to where I wanted it to be, to make the skin look. The other thing I was going for was like to get this blue to come up in here, and to get this orange. This is actually the wall falling apart behind her, but I wanted to bring that out. And even though this texture is blurred, it's still a texture in a sense, and I just wanted to add some color to that, at the same time giving an overall look to the image and to her. So there is kind of a breakdown of how you would do it in Lightroom. You can work with these sliders down here, which are your primary, your red primary, your green primary, and your blue primary. And I think the other power that you're going to find the biggest is in the HSL. Moving these sliders around here, Tone curve is really just about lightening and darkening, but does play into it. So I kind of hope that gives everybody an idea of, plants a seed in your head to go out, do something with Lightroom. Just sit and spend a couple hours making presets. Just make them up. They're very easy to make. I have a whole tutorial on how to make presets. I'm not going to show you how to do it in this because it's not about this. This is about color grading. Okay, so there's two examples of how to color grade. One example over in Photoshop and one example over here in Lightroom. And please know there are thousands of ways to do it. These are just two examples of the way I do it. I probably have, I would say, easily 10 to 15 different techniques on color grading. These are just kind of the two easiest ones that I do. And I just thought I would share them with everybody. So, hey, click like, click subscribe, and check out the other tutorials on the channel. They're free. No harm in checking them out. Don't cost a dime. And feedback is always welcome. Check me out on Instagram. That's kind of where I like to hang out. Twitter, Facebook. Next time.